Welcome to the Key Nutrition Podcast, your one-stop shop for everything food, fitness, and mindset. On today's episode, we had my friend Jordan Wright on the show. Jordan owns a company called Twin Cities Kettlebell. Twin Cities Kettlebell Club. Sorry, I lost out of the club. Now, you could probably guess what this episode is about. It's about kettlebells. And I thought it was, the longer the show goes on, I want to create diversity within the show and bring you different topics that maybe we haven't covered. And we for sure have not covered kettlebells. It's actually more than just a funky looking dumbbell with a handle. And Jordan's going to explain that and explains what kettlebells are, how to utilize them, what are the most popular lifts people do with them. And guess what? These are not just for CrossFit people or power lifters. These are for everybody. And so giving you some tips and tricks on how to use those funny looking little dumbbells at your gym. He broke it down really good. It was a shorter episode. It was very precise. We actually had a time crunch we had to squeeze this into. So he did phenomenal. He brought the heat for 35 minutes. He was very precise and crisp with his answers because this is his wheelhouse. You can tell he's passionate about kettlebells. And you guys give him a follow if you want. I've been incorporating more and more kettlebells, not a ton, but more than zero. And the past probably 3 to 6 months, and I'm a big fan of them. I'm a big fan of the mobility I've been getting. I'm a big fan of the different accessory body parts and little muscle groups that I'm hitting that I wasn't with dumbbells. And you don't have to make the base of your training around kettlebells, but implementing them and knowing how to is incredibly important. So go give him a follow on Instagram so you can check some of this out. And his podcast, I was honored to be a guest on. You guys can check that out on his podcast, which is also listed in the show notes. Great podcaster. Highly recommend giving his show a subscribe and checking that out. So, without further ado, guys, I'm going to let you into this. But before I do, just kidding. I was kidding. Last call for the webinar. The webinar is Monday, the 12th at 6 p.m. Mountain. I have no idea what time that is in Australia or New Zealand, but you could Google it. 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time with my partners from the Next Level Experience. And we are going to be breaking down the science behind gratitude, how to implement, how to maximize your gratitude practice, how to protect your energy field from negative energy vampires, how affirmations play such a role in your life and how to utilize those affirmations. And then we're going to end with this thing called heart-focused breathing, which my partner Kevin will go over to really get your mind and your heart in synchronicity so you can make these affirmations and these gratitudes truly come to life for you. So it's a little sneak peek into what we do in the Next Level Experience. You'll also hear a little more about the Next Level Experience. If you're interested, you'll be able to hear more about that. But if you just want to come and walk away with some tools to become a better you, then show up. The link is in the show notes. It's also on my Instagram. We're almost completely full. It's filled up fast. So if you guys are interested, the last call, definitely check it out. And if you're listening to this 4 or 5 days late, you missed the webinar. It's okay. We might do another one next round. So before we fill up the next round. But so without further ado, guys, I'm going to let you into how kettlebells can help maximize your results with Jordan Wright.
This is Brad Jensen, and you listen to the Key Nutrition Podcast.
Jordan, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, Brad, thanks for having me, man. It's good to be on. I've been listening to you and Michelle rock it out for a while. I do have to say in a world where that whole episode where you guys did the movie intro thing, and we're just losing it. I was driving in my car and had to pull over. I was laughing so hard. I'm so glad somebody else is laughing. I was almost crying. I had to pull over because I couldn't see. I was laughing so hard.
That's the best feedback I can get, because honestly, it's funny. I was genuinely I was trying to fight back the laughing, but in those moments you're like, I don't know if anybody else finds this funny, but I can't stop laughing at myself, which isn't,
And then Michelle couldn't hold it together either, and then that just it just snowballed. So it was funny. It was super. I don't remember anything else from that episode, but I remember that.
Do you know what's funny? I could not tell you what the hell we talked about. I just remember that I just discovered a new talent of mine that I was super stoked about. I was like, holy shit, I could be the movie guy.
Yeah,
Like,
you do the movie voiceovers.
If all else fails, I got something to fall back on.
Yeah, if this whole fitness career that's lasted a couple decades falls to the wayside, I guess.
Never know.
guess
you might just hear my voice. You're like, I think that was that sober bodybuilder guy. Did you hear that? Well, thanks for coming out, man. It's fun to have you on this show. I was on your show. Probably that was I think February or March,
something like that. I don't know. Time is so nebulous now. Like who can keep track of this stuff with COVID and being, all the stuff, like everything kind of just blurs together. I don't know. It was a couple months ago, but yeah.
Well, dude, so your company is called Twin Cities Kettlebell.
Yeah.
And you're a jack strong dude, I'm assuming. You look like it on your Instagram.
I wouldn't say that I'm jacked necessarily, but I'm definitely larger than the average human. I was a college offensive lineman, so I'm like 6'1", 260 about, but I played at almost 300 pounds when I was in college. So, I was a big, strong guy. At one point I could lift pretty heavy weights back in the day.
Did you go to college there in Minnesota? Or?
No, just south of Minnesota. It was a little college called Luther College, which is in Decorah, Iowa, just south of the border, about two and a half hours south of the Twin Cities. It's a great little town, great little college football program, great choir program. That was actually part of what brought me there. But it was super, super fun. But I hurt my back like right at the end of my senior year, which really sucked. And I like cleaved me from a big part of my identity. So I got depressed, started, was prescribed, Valium and Vicodin and shit, which is not great for for a 20-year-old who's depressed. Like that's not a good combo. So I did that for a little bit and then was drinking too heavy and eating like I was still practicing, every day and playing every day. And I got super, super fat. Like after graduation, I went from 300 to 330 to 350 ish. And then, I stopped weighing myself because I was just so disgusted by what I saw on the scale and in the mirror, and then most rational people, once I stopped weighing myself, I didn't start working out. I just put the scale away and just kept doing what I was doing for a period of time until I finally, proposed to my long-term girlfriend, who's now my wife. And I was like, I don't want to look like this in my wedding. And that was kind of when I turned the corner and really started lifting weights again and getting back into fitness, which is also when I happened to kind of discover kettlebells. So it kind of came full circle for me where it was like, oh, this is cool. This is a new unique thing. And that was back in, gosh, man, that was 2007, I guess is when, or 2006. Yeah. The years kind of blur together, but yeah, 2006, 2007 is the first time I picked up a kettlebell and, I was hooked right away. I loved it. Just loved it.
Yeah. It's a really interesting, kind of dichotomy. I've had some buddies who played college football on the line, whether it's D-line or O-line. And, once you're done with your playing career, your job is to not be 300 pounds anymore. It was so interesting to watch them struggle where they're like, dude, I mean, my coaches were telling me, you got to eat more, you got to eat more, you got to, and get your weight up so you can block these guys so you can penetrate the line. And then all of a sudden that goes away and all that behavior is ingrained. So I could see how my buddy ballooned up after college and he was like, dude, you just get so used to eating a certain way. And they're telling you
one of two ways. Usually it's either the guys they do like I did and they get super fucking fat really fast, or you get the guys that are I am going and I'm getting on the elliptical and and they just drop a whole bunch of weight. One of the guys that I played with, he was 300 pounds. And by the time he graduated, he was down 40 pounds. And then I saw him a couple of years later and he was almost 100 pounds lighter than what we had played at, And I was
you got those guys where you're like, you sure you played on the line? Cause you don't look like it. You sure you weren't a wide receiver? Yeah. So you picked up a kettlebell, and that's why I'm having you on, man, is we have not covered kettlebells. And I think it's, listen, I go to a big box gym, right? I go to a Lifetime Fitness, and the dumbbells are always all being used. But then they have the rack over there with the kettlebells. And listen, this wouldn't happen at more of your industrial type or CrossFit gyms, but at these big box, they're always available. because I think the vast majority of people don't actually understand like what they are, how to use them, or there's some stereotypes. I had a client where I'd programmed some kettlebell stuff and he said, "Oh man, I'm not really into that CrossFit stuff." I'm like, "Who said that kettlebells were CrossFit?" "Well, that's what they do in CrossFit." I'm like, "Have you done CrossFit?" "Well, no." "Okay." So, I did teach him a little. I had him send me a video of some of his form. And listen, I'm not a kettlebell expert by any means, but I could tell you what he was doing was not correct.
Yeah.
So
you still know something about human movements. So
yeah, I'm like, that looks really weird.
Way jacked.
You're about to throw it against the mirror. What intrigued you about kettlebells? And like, I think a lot of people out there listening, I know because a lot of general population clients almost think a kettlebell is just a different kind of funky dumbbell.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so what intrigued me about them and why I think they're such a great tool is, I mean, what really hooked me was it honestly was one of the hardest things I had done, because being somebody who had trained so hard to be anaerobic and to be able to move large weights quickly, but need a bunch, then take time off to recover. Right. It was like in football, you go hard for 10 seconds, you get 30 seconds off before the next play starts. And that's how my training was too. Right. Like I was, I'd be doing Olympic power cleans. And you might do 3 sets of 5, but you get 3 to 5 minutes recovery between each of those sets. So that's how my body was trained. But when I first picked up a kettlebell, I was doing swings, I was doing cleans. So like the ballistic movements where you're moving explosively, but you're doing it for an extended period of time, and the person who had introduced me to bells was a Marine. And he was like, "Oh, you think you're strong and you're fit? Like, see if you can snatch this 24 kilo kettlebell, which is 53 pounds. See if you can snatch it for 10 minutes without putting it down." And so like that was his challenge to me. And I was like, "Oh, sure, I got that. I can bench 450. I'm sure I can do this. This is no problem." And I got a few minutes into it and I was just gassed. Right. And then he had me do some like double clean and presses with 2 24-kilo bells and see if I could do 10 minutes with that. And I made it like 6 minutes before I had to go outside and threw up. And it was at a Lifetime Fitness here in Minneapolis. Right. Like, and I'm a personal trainer there at this point. And I'm like literally about to throw up on the floor of the gym that I train in. So I like had to run out the door. I was super embarrassed, but I was like, naturally I'm hooked because it was the hardest thing that I had ever done physically. So it's like that dynamic resistance, that strength endurance piece is such a huge part of it. And then because the weight sits on the outside of your hand when you're doing like overhead movements and things like that, you can move safely through ranges of motion that you can't normally get with a barbell. Especially dumbbells are fairly adaptive as well, but they're not as that same dynamic resistance. Like picking up, think of like a sandbag, right? Shifts, the weight kind of shifts when you're moving it around. Kettlebells are the same way because you move them in curvilinear paths. So at the bottom of the arc it's really heavy, in the middle of the arc it feels almost weightless, and then at the top it's heavy again, right? So it's like you're moving them ballistically. You can move them safely through a number of ranges of motion. And since I played the offensive line for so long, like I had some pretty jacked up joints. Like, I had a bad elbow. I've had a surgically reconstructed left shoulder, dislocated every finger on my hand, bad wrists, all these things. So like having an implement that was sub maximal load and that I could put into ranges of motion safely really helped me rehab my shoulder. It really helped me rehab my back. Like there's a lot of things that you can do with it that really help you be able to stay safe and work through ranges of motion that you can't access, particularly with a barbell.
And what movement would be an example of that for somebody out there listening that would be different? Like that range of motion, you talking about like a kettlebell swing or?
No, so when I'm talking like ranges of motion you can't access with a barbell, I'm thinking is particularly like overhead pressing movements, right? Because if you think about the positioning of a barbell, you have to have your hands in front of you, like so, which nobody can see me, but think about where you catch in a barbell clean, right? If you're doing that, you have to be able to flex your wrists, you have to be able to internally rotate the head of your humerus. There's a number of things that you have to be able to do to get into the appropriate position. Whereas with a kettlebell, you just set the bell on the outside of your wrist and you connect it here, and then you can just go through. You can externally rotate if you need to. You can stay neutral if you have that range of motion to be able to do that, right? So it allows a lot more flexibility as far as the pathing that you move in for people that have restrictions or have injuries. Like, so that was super helpful. And then also because the center of gravity is at the bottom of the bell, when you're in that overhead position, you have to lock in and hold your shoulder steady. And so if you start to rotate away, the center of the gravity of that bell starts to try and move your arm. So you have to counteract that. It's anti-rotational stability, right? That's super important. So when you think of like moves, like you see a lot of people do Turkish get-ups are a great movement that you'll see a lot of people do to help improve their shoulder stability. Now, I don't recommend doing Turkish get-ups with heavy weight, but you'll see some guys do it as like a feat of strength or something, which is cool. But like for people that are injured, it can be a great movement because it forces you with a relatively light load to be able to work stabilization muscles that and work through a full range of motion. You're starting on the floor, getting all the way up to overhead, standing, and then back down to the floor, and do that in a stabilized, compound manner. So there's a lot of specific movements to it that will help you, that will force you to work muscles that don't necessarily get worked in the way that they get worked with a barbell or even with dumbbells.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense to me. Yeah, I've seen some people do some heavy Turkish. If you guys don't know what a Turkish get up, just Google it. But where I'm like, yeah, these are advanced guys that are, lifting a ton of weight, because even with the lighter amount of weight, when I implemented some, let me tell you, like I realized like even my core strength was really poor. Like I couldn't like hold my shoulder and flex my ab. This was a couple of years ago, but that makes total sense. So good range of now, like when I see people, this is what I thought for years, is like coming from the bodybuilding background. I'd see people do kettlebell swings, going back to that. And I'm like, that is not doing a single thing. What, like, I know better now, but first,
of course.
What does a kettlebell swing do? You see these guys, moving the weight underneath their legs. Just trying to give you guys a visual who don't know what it is out there. Like, what are the purpose of those?
Yeah. So I've got to qualify this. I've got to qualify this answer. It depends on the style, right? So there's two primary schools of movement when it comes to kettlebell. There is the hard style guys, which their intention when they swing a bell is to swing it as hard as possible, as fast as possible, and really emphasize a hip hinge and a snap, right? So think of like a good morning or an RDL, right? When you're trying to keep your legs relatively straight, push your hips, all the way back, really activate the posterior chain, and then they stand and explode. They stand explosively and squeeze their glutes, squeeze their hamstrings, squeeze their core, and send the bell as high as they can, as explosively as they can, because the hard style guys are trying to emphasize they're trying to express the most power possible and the most total muscle tension possible in every single movement. That's the hard style, and that's what you see most people do. And that's probably what your client was thinking of when he said, "Well, that's what CrossFit guys do," right? It's like they do the American swings, is what they're called, where they go all the way overhead. So they're really up in the amplitude of how far are they moving the weight. They're trying to generate power. So those are really good for power generation, and really good for getting your heart rate up really, really fast. So you can get a lot of bang for your buck in a short period of time. So like, I love it for Metcon. I love it I used to call them afterburners, right? Where I would put my clients through a 45-minute strength training session, and I'd be like, "Oh, by the way, we're not quite done yet. I'm going to have you do swings, 10 swings on and off, for 5 minutes. You got to do 10 swings at a time, rest for 30 seconds, 10 we're going to do that for 5 minutes, just so they're like basically ready to puke at the end. Like they're great for cardio, great for just getting your heart rate up in a very short period of time. But it's also really good for like total body coordination, and really developing that power output and that strength movement. That's kind of the hard style. And now what I do with my athletes, and the different style that I prefer is actually the kettlebell sport style. And so this is specific to what's called Girovoy sport. And, that comes from Russia. It is an actual competitive sport where you're trying to accomplish as many reps as you can of a specific movement for a period of time. So it's like a 10-minute set where you cannot put the weights down, and you're trying to do as many reps of a specific movement as you can. There's actually a judge judging your movement and telling you whether or not your rep actually counted. So like for me, like long cycle is what it's called. You might have two 53-pound bells. You swing them between your legs, clean them to your chest. You have to stop with them cleaned and rested on your chest. And then you press them all the way overhead, and you have to stand with them fixated overhead. And that counts as one rep. And in 10 minutes, I might be trying to get 60 to 100 reps, depending on what rank I'm going for, or, how heavy the bells are, et cetera. But for a guy in my weight class, they want me to be lifting 24s, 28s, or 32 kilo kettlebells, so you're talking thousands and thousands of pounds in a 10-minute set without any rest and without stopping. So when that's the intention, you're trying to work as minimally as possible with every rep. You're trying to be as efficient as possible with every rep, and you're counterbalancing against the load. So that's a very different intention behind the movement. You're trying to move in a very efficient manner, very fluidly, and really counterbalance against the load. But that allows you to work for a lot longer and in a way that's more strength endurance based rather than power output based.
Gotcha. Nope, that makes total sense. The first way you described, would that help somebody? Would it ever help somebody with lifts? Let's say like a deadlift, like because of that power coordination and that hinge hip, and like be able to get more explosiveness for lifts like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Both styles are beneficial in have a lot of translation, because both of them, one of the things they both have in common is grip strength, right? And one of the big issues that a lot of people have, especially when we're talking deadlift specifically, a lot of people fail on grip, right? They could pull more weight if they could hold on to it, right? So that is definitely one part of it, is grip strength. But then as you talked about, the ability to hinge and the ability to get better range of motion, and then to coordinate those movements right across many muscle groups. That's the thing, is it's a very compound movement, and to be able to move explosively is really, really huge, especially when you talk about translating it to a powerlifting application, because barbell speed off of the floor is often predictive of how much weight you can move. Like, you can actually calculate what is somebody's 1 rep max based on the weight that was on the bar and how fast the bar came off of the ground, right? So the ability to translate energy into an explosive movement is very important, and that can really help with athletes a lot. I think that's one of the big gaps that we have actually in our youth athletes, especially, is we train them for power or we train them for strength, but not for power, and not for that ability to generate force quickly. They get used to moving slow, and then when you ask them to go fast, these big strong guys suddenly can't translate that into power output, and that's a really big shortcoming for a lot of youth athletes.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes a ton of sense. No, thank you. And so why are all the kettlebells in kilos? I just always have to do the math, just for the record. I'm just
from Russia with love, my friend.
Yeah, right.
From Russia. Yeah,
I'm like, okay, so if that's 28, and then
it's 28 times 2.2.
Yeah, 2.2. I'm like, it's up there. Okay, I'll just 2 plus some change.
Yeah, exactly. Just double it and add a little bit to it, but mostly.
So is there any benefit to doing so? Like, you'll see a lot of the common movements with kettlebells, kind of the ones you've described. Is there any benefit from doing, let's say, let me throw out a couple, like an RDL with kettlebells compared to dumbbells? Is there a difference?
Yeah, so there's not going to be a ton of difference with a movement like RDLs. They're going to be fairly analogous. The big difference is on a dumbbell, the weight is centered on either side of your hand, so it's fairly balanced, right? Whereas if you're doing it with kettlebells and you're gripping it by the handle, the center of gravity is going to be below your hand, so it's just going to be a little bit more challenging. You might the same weight might require a little bit more force. You might have a little bit better muscle recruitment, but I don't think in general it's going to be a huge difference. I think the nice thing with kettlebells, is the portability component of it, right? Like, you only need one bell and you can take it with you pretty much anywhere. And if you've got a heavy enough load that it challenges you and you can do like the ballistic movements with it, you can do the ballistics, you can do presses, you can do RDLs, you can do all sorts of lunge variations, right? You can take it anywhere and basically have it be your portable gym. Like if you're going on vacation with the family or something, you're driving somewhere, it's great for that, I think. And there's very little that you won't be able to do with it effectively. Is it the best for? It's not the best for everything. I just think it's like the most versatile tool because it's good for everything, and for some things it is the best. Like ballistics, I think it is the best for ballistics, just from a safety perspective and an output standpoint. Right, you're a lot safer doing swings with a kettlebell than you are trying to teach somebody how to do, a barbell clean and jerk, for example. I mean, that's a highly technical movement.
Right. Yeah. No, that actually helps a lot. And it's probably one of the, just that center of gravity too. Like when I do farmer's walks or something, I mean, the amount of weight I'm carrying with the dumbbells, how long they are, my forearms start giving out a lot faster because I have to balance that. Whereas the kettlebell, I can get a really heavy kettlebell and walk, and it feels really good on both sides.
Yeah, for sure.
I
love farmer's carries. This is one of the fundamental movements, loaded carries of any kind, but I especially love them with kettlebells.
Yes, me too. I really, really have liked those with kettlebells as of late. So when we look at hypertrophy movements, meaning curls, let's say, I'll sometimes do skull crushers with them only because they're so crowded over in the dumbbell section.
Yeah.
And there's nobody over by the kettlebells. So I'll throw down a mat. Is there much benefit to doing, let's say, where I got into lateral raises with kettlebells, and I liked how it kind of kept that center of gravity. I found I was pulling more laterally with that delt than a dumbbell. Is there much benefit, or is it kind of like, take your pick? It's not the biggest deal ever.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both of those, right? Like you'll have your preference probably, between the two. I will say that I think that kettlebells, in general, work your grip more than dumbbells do. So because that center of gravity again is below your hand, especially if you're doing a lateral raise, they're going to want to sway a little bit. So you're going to have to grip them a little bit harder to keep them stable, right? So there's always that aspect, but they both offer that same ability to get good alignment for the muscle that you're trying to focus on. So you can ensure that you're in line with your shoulders well, and that you can really activate and focus on that delt. And then it's just a little, sometimes a little trickier knowing what the appropriate load is, A, because they're in kilograms, like you mentioned, but then B, because they're not equally distributed on either side of your hand and you're not directly connected, the lever gets a little bit longer, so it makes it a little bit harder to figure out exactly what the right load is. So you might be able to do lateral raises with 35-pound dumbbells, but if you pick up 16 kg kettlebell, you might be a little bit harder for you to get it up that high. So you might be able to go down and load just a little bit to get that full range of motion.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. What do you have Gen Pop people come to you and teach them kettlebells?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favorite things, with my team. One of my favorite things is getting people who are brand new to kettlebell and to kettlebell sport, especially, but just introducing anybody to kettlebell. Like, I'm all about that. I love that. Like, I love getting people who have, come from some other sport, or they're from CrossFit, or they're from powerlifting, or, they were a college athlete or whatever. And they're looking for their next thing. They're looking for something. They're looking for a competitive outlet, excuse me. I love teaching people kettlebell sport. I love teaching, just Gen Pop people, just kettlebells in general too, and like how they can use them safely, effectively, because I still think I think they're the best tool out there, but I'm biased.
Well, yeah, but I agree with you. They're probably the most versatile. And one reason why I wanted to have you on was kind of kill the stigma that kettlebells are for a certain type of lifter, Yeah. And like they're for power lifters or CrossFit people. I've heard a lot of people saying them.
Yeah. Well, then you'll also hear people say, well, they're only for cardio and you can't build muscle with them. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
I'm still 260 pounds, and in a given workout, I lift over 10,000 kilos. Volume is volume for one. And then if I wanted to really focus on hypertrophy, I would just go with heavier loads, slow down, do more time under tension, do more focused eccentric movements, it's the same principles. It's an implement. It's a hunk of fucking steel. Like, it's just a matter of loading it appropriately, knowing what you're doing, maybe working with an expert to help you understand how the principles are different, or how the movements are different for that implement. But it can be used by anybody. And that's the thing, is it's so accessible. I've got people who are 68-year-old grandmas that I'll train with. And I've got a 16-year-old high school football player who's probably going to get a full ride scholarship because he's one of the best tight ends in the country. The range is incredible. Like, you can tailor it to whomever. The people can take it anywhere. You can work with light loads, heavy loads, low volume, high volume, quick and dirty, 10-minute blitzkrieg workouts that leave you just gasping for air. Or you can do 90-minute sessions with rest in between and use it in the same or similar manner as you would with dumbbells, right? It's for anybody. You just have to tailor the approach to the goal, to your capability, and make sure you're scaling it appropriately and then progressively overloading, just like we do with any other implement.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that, because the weight is the weight. How you choose to use the weight is going to determine what kind of training it is. It's not like, oh, like a deadlift is only for power lifters or any of these things. But if somebody was out there and was like, okay, I've got some kettlebells, these sound intriguing, but what is your best suggestion to somebody out there that's listening? Is like, oh, my gym's got some kettlebells. I've never picked them up. Like, what movements would you start with? And where's do you either have do you have some kind of guide, or do you send people is it YouTube videos, or just to give some people some a practical tip to take, go into your gym. Don't be scared of those. Start with these couple movements and see how you like them.
Yeah, for sure. The one that I think anybody can access without any professional instruction is a goblet squat. Right. Go pick up the bell, put it in front of you and hold it with both hands. You can either grip it by the handle or grip it by the body of the bell, and then just use it as a loaded front squat and see how that feels. Get as deep as you can. You can use the bell as a nice counterbalance so that you can sit nice and deep. That's a great place to start. That's an easy, basic, fundamental human movement that is, I think, really awesome. If I was going to a gym that had kettlebells, I would ask, at Lifetime, that's where I started. I was a certified kettlebell instructor that worked at Lifetime Fitness. I would ask them hey, are any of your trainers kettlebell certified? Because I kind of want to learn how to use those. Right. And a trainer will likely show it to you for free. Right. So if you have access in person to somebody that is a kettlebell expert, awesome. That's a great place to start. Personal trainers usually understand human movement pretty well. So you can also get some help there. As far as online resources, there are some, just like everything, there are some awesome people on YouTube, and there's some absolute fucking monkeys on YouTube that have no idea what the hell they're doing. And they're just you just grab this bell and throw it out there and squeeze your glutes. And, I'm doing my best Sheena, that's how you get the peach butt, find some reputable people, right? But check credentials. There are people that actually are certified in kettlebell movement. So IKFF is a certification. Strong First is one. RKC is another. Those are a few that are out there. But working with a professional is always great. I will send people instructional stuff. I like to send people I like to send people personalized videos. I am working on building out my YouTube content, but I haven't done a ton of that. But there's a lot of good people out there. Kettlebell Kings has a ton of good stuff out there, and they're the number one seller of kettlebells in the country, and they have great resources on their website. Joe Daniels is another guy that is a fellow coach who I love, and he does hypertrophy stuff with kettlebells, and he's a former bodybuilder who's 5'9" and 220 and just built like a brick. When people are like, oh, you can't build muscle with kettlebells, I'm like, I really tell Joe Daniels that, because that guy is literally just a ball of muscle, so there's a few resources out there. You can always hit me up. I'm always happy to help.
Yeah, what's interesting too about that is I've incorporated some more kettlebells. A buddy kind of showed me a little more technicalities behind it, because I'm not Strong First. I'm not certified in kettlebell, and so I also don't have an ego that somehow, because I've been around the bodybuilding community, I know how to pick up a kettlebell the exact same, because it's not the truth. I
appreciate that,
but
I very much appreciate that.
Let me tell you, interesting enough, things like my brachialis, my forearm muscles have probably the most defined growth I've seen in them ever. And from doing some of those movements that I wouldn't kind of expect, where I'm working different muscle groups. Again, a Turkish get up, I was like, I can do that, bro. It was I don't even remember what kilo it was, but let's just say it was a dainty one. I don't even remember, because I didn't want to.
Yeah.
And man, I could barely, and I realized just how much some of my mobility and core strength and all these accessory muscles that kind of help you were off kilter. And so it's been really good. I tore my pec about 10 years ago, and it's just never healed the same. And doing some kettlebell stuff has really kind of helped that range of motion in that. I was getting really tight. And so I'm a big fan of it. And obviously I don't know everything there is. And that's why I don't know a ton, to be honest. So I wanted to have a guy like you come on and share some of this. So thank you for doing that, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little about your company before I let you go, because I almost think we need to have you back on to go over some other stuff, but you gave 30 minutes of fire on kettlebells. That was very descriptive, very good information. But tell us a little about your company, what you guys do.
Yeah. So Twin Cities Kettlebell Club, it's an online group of people that are doing kettlebell sports specifically. And my approach is what I call an integrated coaching approach, because I'm also a nutrition coach with Jason Phillips' company, NCI, which I know that's how we first got connected. So I'm a level 1 NCI coach, getting my level 2 here in next weekend. So I do nutrition coaching in addition to the kettlebell sport coaching, because I feel like those two things kind of go hand in hand. That's kind of the focus of the Twin Cities Kettlebell Club, is really around that kettlebell sport component. And I'm in the process of launching my second brand, which is the Kettlebell Fat Blast, and that is much more for the Gen Pop, and that is around like what we were talking about, like fitness style movements, and more accessible to people who aren't interested in kettlebell sport necessarily, but want like, hey, I've got 30 minutes and I want to get my ass kicked, and I want to be able to do this a few times a week, and I'm gonna lose some weight, doing that. So I'm in process of building out that content and building out some of that YouTube, some of the supporting videos, coaching up some of those movements. So those are kind of the two big things that I have going with my company.
Right on, man. Well, where are you hanging out the most? Where can people find you and find your company to look into working with you if they're interested in learning more about kettlebells?
Yeah, at Twin Cities Kettlebell Club on Instagram, and Twin Cities Kettlebell Club at gmail.com, twincitieskettlebellclub.com. So everything is Twin Cities Kettlebell Club. I all across the board, keeps it nice and simple. You can ping me there. And the Platform Podcast is the name of the podcast that I put out, and that's where you guys should go listen to Brad's episode, because that was fire. I get a lot of great feedback about that. People love your story. I know you've told it 1,000 times, but it's a great story. And I wanted to thank you for sharing that. People really appreciated it and gave me a lot of positive feedback on that episode.
That's amazing,
great.
Man. Great to hear that. So we'll list everything for you guys in the show notes, and he's a great podcaster. I know because you interviewed me, and I can immediately tell it was great. So we'll list the podcast for you guys, the Instagram and the website. Check it out. And then when you launch it, man, let me know, dude. Let's have you back on to talk more about that. So
awesome.
I appreciate your time, man, and appreciate you bringing fire in a shorter window than we wanted. So thank you guys. Give them a follow. I was just looking through your content. A lot of good, I was asking, like, where can people find some of this? And I was just skimming through some of your content. I'm like, oh, he definitely breaks down some movements on here and videos and shows you and
it's almost all on Instagram right now. Definitely just need to put some more effort into getting it onto YouTube as well.
Yeah, you and me both, man. It's just like, the checkbox list of entrepreneurs. It's just like, what?
There's
and
only
I'm
so
like,
much time
I'll get
in
to
the
that
day.
tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes, and I'm like, I got another shit I got to deal with. So you guys give them a follow. Definitely check some of that out. Don't be afraid of the kettlebells. They're not just for whoever you think they're for. They're for you. They're for everybody. And I'm a big fan of them and looking forward to learning more about them. So thank you, man. Appreciate your time coming on. You're a stud.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Brad. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me on.
Okay. Talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye.
See you, brother.
Hey guys, it's Brad here. Just wanted to thank you so much for listening. We couldn't be any more grateful that you took the time out of your day to listen to us. We hope we provided value. If we did, it would mean the world to us if you would subscribe and share this with your friends.